skies glowing. The wind blows high. Winter's light, cold and dry. The wind blows high. Winter's light, cold and dry.
Hey everyone, guess what? We are back and it is summer, and you know what? I've had a couple of breweries kind of in the back of my mind that I've wanted to get around to for a little while, and one of those is Les Trois Mousquetaires. Now, way back when we used to sell Les Trois Mousquetaires, and we sold them in the big 750ml Cajun cork glass bottles. I really liked those, but they were really, really slow selling because not everyone wants, you know, 3/4 of a liter of Rausch beer.
No.
Now, Trois Mousquetaires' big thing was always the fact that all they did was lagers. Now, that's obviously not the case anymore because they're doing a white IPA, but they're still doing different styles, and that's why I really, really like them. So in addition to a white IPA, kind of the dead IPA style along with Brut IPA, and a Tangerine Sour, we have a Sticke Alt, which is a style I can absolutely guarantee we've
Never done before.
so that's going to be fantastic. And then we've also got a Maibock. So very, very different German styles from a brewery that, again, formerly a lager specialist, but still doing some weird, weird stuff. So very excited to do this one. All this and more coming up July 27th, 6 o'clock. We'll see you then.
No, Bird Media Boutique.
We live? All right. Hi, everyone. Guy with Edward Hilton here. We are here with Les Trois Mousquetaires breweries from Brossard, Quebec. Now, Brossard is basically just a neighborhood of Montreal these days, over on the east bank of the river. But I've had a long relationship with this brewery now, and I want to tell you a little bit about that before we dive all the way in here. Now, when I was introduced to Les Trois Mousquetaires, it would have been about 2004. This was coming through Mike Tessier, who was the very first person to bring a lot of Quebec breweries to Alberta. He was the very first person to bring in du Ciel. He was the first to bring in Les Tours de Diable out of Shigwinigan. He was the first to bring in Les Trois Mousquetaires. And when I was introduced to these folks, I was introduced to this as they are a lager specialist. And to a point, they kind of still are, but we actually only have one real lager here with the Maibock. So we'll talk a little bit about how the brewery was founded, what they started out doing, and how they've changed. I also want to talk a little bit about the fact that we have some really unusual styles. Yes, we have a fruited sour. Everyone and their mum does a fruited sour. Great. But they also have a Maibock, a white IPA, and a Sticke Alt, which is apparently the correct pronunciation on that. So I'm excited to try all of these with you because there's some really neat stuff here. Also, nice to have from a brewery perspective, we actually have fresh stuff from Quebec because it has been a little bit of a run of getting stale beer from this part of the world. Oh, Tyler, don't be such a stick in the mud about the white IPA. White IPA can be really nice. So, I guess let's jump right in with the Maibock or Maibock. Now, this is a variation of Hellebock or Helles Lager. So, this is post the Lager Revolution in Germany. We'll talk about this a little bit more with the Sticke Alt, but up to a point, German beer used to be reasonably smoky, reasonably dark, very heavy, and then Pilsner and Hellebock all of a sudden just exploded onto the world scene, and suddenly there were these very pale, very clean tasting beers. But Maibock or Maibock, it's always been a little bit bigger, a little bit richer. Maibock is traditionally brewed in the month of May. Bock means strong, so it's a strong springtime lager that's usually a little more heavily hopped. Not because it needs to be necessarily, but to counterbalance the additional sweetness that comes from making a higher alcohol beer. So you end with a beer that's very honeyed, it can be very spicy, it can be very floral. They tend to be at least a little on the earthy side. This is a style of German beer that I've always enjoyed. I think I've talked about this a little bit. My first ever craft beer that I got really geeky about was actually Big Rock's Maibock, that I really, really loved at the time. I don't think I still would. But this is a classical German style done in Quebec. It's a strong lager with a heavy hop influence. It's got that lovely golden color. This just smells like a lovely afternoon. Like, I know I'm all about the IPAs. I drink IPAs when it's -40. I drink IPAs when it's +40. This to me drinks very much like a summertime sort of beer. It's clean, it's spicy, it's round, it has that lager fruitiness. It has that lovely, like, spicy, earthy, noble hop character in the nose. I also love one thing that I notice is because, as I said right off the hop, we've had so many issues with stale beers, be it AleSmith or whoever. Not only do they put the brewed on date on the cans, which in this case is January 26th of this year, they also put the aging potential on the cans on the back. And it says, oh, this is fine for 12 months. Which, you know what, if you just told me right out the gate that, like, your lager was good for 12 months, I wouldn't always believe you. Put it on the can. And you brewery with the reputation of Les Trois Mousquetaires, I do tend to give that a little bit more weight. Now, Trois Mousquetaires, like I said, from Brossard, Quebec, started in 2004 with two beers, one called D'Artagnan, one called Aramis. Now, you'd probably be thinking, well, their next two beers would be called Athos and Porthos, but no. Despite starting out in 2004, 18 years ago, the brewery is literally old enough to drink, with two beers called Aramis and D'Artagnan, they have literally never made a beer called Athos or Porthos. So apparently only one of the three Musketeers actually matters, and then, you know, D'Artagnan gets his own beer because I guess he's special. But yeah, I like their style. I like their lager focus. I love the richness of the grain coming off of this. How are you doing on connection problems there, Aaron? We're fine on our end? Okay. Apparently we're fine.
Someone said.
Yeah, somebody, yeah. Sorry, Eric. I think that might be on your end, because everybody else seems okay for now. Now, this style of beer, not one we see very often in the market. This is certainly not a forgotten beer. When I talk about forgotten beer styles, I'm talking about things like Lichtenheiner and some of these, like, completely forgotten beers. These beers that they stopped being brewed for, say, the 1980s through the 2010s. These are beer styles that were resurrected by the 21st century craft beer revolution. Maibock never was. Holsten, I'm trying to be very charitable. Holsten has made a Maibock. All this time. They have. And it was certainly a spicy, hoppy lager. It was not to this standard, but they kept the flag flying, they kept the style alive. Was it a particularly good Maibock? God, no. But it was okay. And we owe that to Holsten. We don't owe anything else, but we owe them that. I will say that some of the German breweries, when we talk about extinct beer styles, a very large amount of them are usually Belgian or French or British. The Germans, they tend to have kept most of their historical beer styles alive, at least in very, very small amounts. And again, some of this comes down to that we never saw in Germany, the point where in Canada, at one point, we just had Molson and Labatt. If you don't like Molson and Labatt, well then tough shit, you don't get to drink beer today. We never saw that in Germany. There were always some small breweries. There was always a microbrewing culture. And so some of these smaller styles, at least in the town where they came from, they tended to stay alive. Whereas in the rest of Europe and in the rest of the world, a lot of beer styles tended to die out. You know, we might say, oh, Holsten Maibock wasn't a very good Maibock. No, it wasn't. It straight out was not. But it means that Maibock never went extinct, which for a lot of beer styles, they did. They had a 20, 30, 40, 100-year period where they just didn't exist. There's no record of it. It never got to evolve. It never got to change. It never got to see variations. You know, it's all well and good for establishment to go back and find a extinct beer style out of a brewing manual from 1886. That's great. You are creating an artifact of that style. But however much you might not like, you know, the commercial styles of Maibock that were made from, say, the Second World War up to the early 2000s, it still had a chance to evolve, to change, to have a life as the whole beer world moved on. The extinct styles, they didn't. They're frozen in time. They're frozen in time from beer recipes that we find from the 1880s or the 1770s, or whenever we find these recipes, they're stuck. They've never had a chance to change. Maibock, for whatever else this style might be, has had that life, that opportunity to evolve and be riffed on. So even if you were an early adoptee microbrewer like Fritz Maytag with Anchor Steam or Anchor Brewing in San Francisco in the early 1980s, they could go out and buy a can of Holsten Maibock and have an idea what Maibock was supposed to be. I love that this style was kept alive in small, not very good examples all through time. I think that's a much better version of, you know, how a beer should live than it just being resurrected 100 years after it was last brewed. Yeah, the temperature recommendation I also like. I like most things about this brewery, and I really like that they're now in 473s. The first time that we got this brewery, they were kind of sold the same way as Unibrew beers, where they came in the giant 750ml brown glass bottle with like the cage and cork on top. You have to unscrew the wire cage and pull the cork, and you have to drink all 750 mils right on the spot. And I know that's really only like 2 beers, but it feels like more, and that's such a stupid way to put it, but it really does. When you have to drink like a whole wine bottle full of beer, even if it's only, what is it, 6.9? 6.8. It feels like a lot. And I think there's just a nicer way to present it, so I'm glad they're doing this now. And yeah, big hat tip to the brewers for this one. I really like this style. I'm glad to see it being brewed in Canada. I'm glad to see it being brewed well in Canada. And also, I mean, when I was first introduced to True de Diable as being this lager specialist, yes, this is an ale. Yes, this is an ale. This is the sour, which let's call it an ale. It's nice to see they're still sticking somewhat to their old lager roots. This is lovely. It's spicy. It's fresh. It's a style we don't see very often, and it's done very, very well. Is glassware recommendation a German thing? No, it's an all over the world thing, but the Germans tend to take all of these things more seriously than everyone else. I'll dive a little bit into like German wine law, where there are 4 different categories of German wine law, all of which kind of nest inside each other and all of which are really important. Yeah, the Germans tend to very carefully specify everything. Everything is categorized, everything is specified, everything is very scientifically weighed and measured, and this needs to be in this glass. I like that about the German wine industry, and I am unsurprised to see that German beers tend to go the same way. Being as these folks have a very German lager basis as their founding point, I'm unsurprised to see that that kind of carries forward into their own style.
It's a tiny bit of ashiness, like
Got like an
it's
ashiness?
gone. Just like, yeah, just as soon as it hits,
I think that's the noble hops.
just immediately, and it's like dissipates so quick. It's not
I
fortunate or anything, but it's just kind of,
I get like almost like his white pepper for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing.
yeah, still.
Okay, so we are on to beer number 2, the IPA Blanche White IPA. Now, White IPA came about in about 2008 as a collaborative idea between Boulevard Brewing and Deschutes. Now, Deschutes was really great at making West Coast IPAs. Makes sense, they're in Bend, Oregon on the West Coast. And Boulevard was really, really good at making these rich, spicy German-style Hefeweizens, these Belgian-style wits. They were good at making these very cloudy-style beers. They wanted to make like a collaboration between the two breweries. So they came up with the idea of a white IPA, a style that is, as I've talked about before, kind of become a bit of an artifact because hazy IPAs do basically everything that old school white IPAs used to do, but also kind of do them better. So I want to taste the old school white IPA, like this one right here, and I want to talk about it because we are now at the point where the craft beer revolution has moved on so far that styles that came out post craft beer explosion are now being left behind. White IPA to a point, Brute IPA certainly. Hopefully someday Black IPA will be left in the rearview mirror. We're now at the point where like styles that have only been 12 years or 14 years old are now starting to be left behind a little bit. What I want to talk about, I mean, this great idea. It's a big spicy wheat ale, but with hops. Those are both things I really like. They would go well together, in theory. Let's find out. You certainly get the hops right away. And it's a very West Coast sort of hopping with a lot more lemon. Why is it white IPA? Really because they say it is. And I do get more bitterness out of this. I get more West Coast nature out of this than I would expect out of a traditional hazy IPA. I think if we go looking for that piney grapefruit hard bitterness hit, it is in there. But you're right, it's a lot of lemon candy, isn't it? Like, I mean, I get that big, stinky, cannabis-y sort of hoppy nose that you get from the West Coast. I get that really cheesy hop note in the background. I get lots of pine, lots of juniper, lots of like big, punchy, crunchy flavors. And again, white IPA should be West Coast, because when white IPA came out, there were rumblings of East Coast IPAs. I don't know what the exact timeline is between the very first brewing of Heady Topper and when white IPA had its big moment in the sun, which I would say would be the big summer in terms of sales for Deschutes Chainbreaker White IPA, which was an absolute phenomenon when it came out. And I want to say that was about 2011, 2012, but I could be way off. I want to say the very first brewing of Heady Topper was probably 2014. So, yeah, this style, White IPA, should be West Coast influenced because it predates East Coast IPAs. Hazy IPAs kind of replaced it in the market. But the idea of having this hazy, rich, chunky, big, like malty mouthfeel, stop me if you think I'm describing hazy IPA, because I really am. But then add in all of the hop bitterness, all of the richness of those big West Coast hops. Yeah, I'm broadly describing hazy IPA, but they still drink more West Coast, so they have more bitterness, they have more of a pine backbone, they have more just punchy power than a lot of hazies. And Craig, no, you're right. But I'm talking this in more of a meta sort of way, this is absolutely a wheat beer base with IPA tones. Yes, it is. But so's hazy East Coast IPAs. I mean, they all include unmalted or malted wheat. They all have that, like, rich, kind of grainy, cereally cream of wheat mouthfeel to them. They all have that. The difference between white IPA and hazy IPA, to me, is actually the hopping, where these tend to have that big, sharp, upfront, this is grapefruit, pine, juniper, right in your face, big, hard hop hit, whereas hazies tend to have it a little bit more buried in the background. But white IPA absolutely influenced hazy IPA, which became New England IPA, which then went back and reinvigorated West Coast IPA and changed West Coast IPA and created things like 88's Wave Pool, which is kind of a no-coast IPA that has influences from both sides. This was kind of the, I don't want to call it a bridging beer or a olive branch beer because there's really no East Coast, West Coast beef. This isn't the mid-90s rap scene. But like, this has its own unique bridging quality where you can see where West Coast IPA existed, you can taste white IPA, and then you can see where like hazy IPA or New England IPA comes from. And you can feel that evolution through this beer, and that's why I really like this beer style. Is this happened, and without it, I don't know if New England IPA happens. And yeah, a proto-hazy is a great way to put it. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, thank you, Craig. You're right. This is everything I like, but it's not a hazy IPA. It's running right up against the edge of it, but there's no like mandarin orange, there's no creamsicle, there's no over-the-top sweetness. We never are running the risk of tasting like that. What was that awful black and white can that tasted like Rickard's White and claimed to be a white IPA? Big Hat, maybe? Something like that. Yeah, there's no risk of it running into the... There's no bitterness here. How are we calling this an IPA? It's just orange and wheat, and it's just Rickard's White. It never runs into that. This is absolutely an IPA first, and the wheat is secondary. Hello again, John. We are just finishing up with Beer 2, the IPA Blanche. And yeah, it's also danker, and I think that's the West Coast hopping. It is a different experience than New England IPA, and I like skating on this difference because, to me at least, it's notable. It's a different experience. Now, I would also say that if you dump this in a line of 10 New England IPAs, if you put in Superset and Skyrocket and Force Majeure and a whole big line of New England IPAs and you stuck that in there, would I pick that out as being like the most West Coast of them? I don't know if I would. I don't know if any of you would. I'd like to say I would, but that's just pretension. this really does skirt that line, and I like that. We talked about that, Chris, early on. It's basically saying if you see this beer and it's 3 months old, don't be weird about it because the beer is going to be fine. I kind of like that. I like them saying, this is the brewed on date. This is the date where you should go up to the counter and complain about this beer being too old. I kind of like having both. Because I genuinely have people, when I have like a cabin supersat that's 6 weeks old, people complain. And fair enough, they should. It's an IPA. You want it as fresh as possible, but 6 weeks is not a long time. All right, let's move on to the Sticke Alt. Now, alt beer, when you do some Googling about it and you start doing the research for doing a tasting like this, man, there's a lot of misinformation about alt beer. Now, alt beer means old beer, and it doesn't mean in the sense that, hey, this beer was stale, or hey, this beer was aged for an extended period. No, none of that is true. Alt in this sense means old in the sense that, hey, we're Germany. We make mostly lagers. We make helles. We make hefeweizen. We make lots of lovely, smooth, fruity, easy drinking lagers. But we used to make ale. So this is old in the sense that this is a top fermented beer, but it's still German. So they then turn around and lager it for a period. Now that's alt beer. Now Sticke Alt does not mean sticky or sweet. It generally means reserve or special or kept back. Now you'd also think that would mean aged, but usually this is a fairly hoppy style, so it doesn't mean aged. This beer definitely did not ransack Congress, no. It's a deep dive, Eric, well done.
I was thinking.
But no, this beer is a ale. It is a amber to dark ale because, as we've discussed in previous tastings, old beers tended to be before like the lager revolution, where they discovered to like kiln beer over coke fires with no influence from the smoke, where the malt tasted very clean, like in a Maibock. Everything was slow roasted over a wood fire or a peat fire, and it tends to pick up very smoky notes, it tends to pick up dark color. That was just what beer was. So alt is an ale, yes, but it's also always an amber ale, and it usually has at least a light smoke touch. I don't pick up very much in this, if any, but this is very much that style. Sticke Alt meaning special or reserve or held back. You're talking about a little bit higher alcohol, and on this one it's 6%. And then you're also talking about usually a little bit higher hopping. So this is basically a recreation of what Germany in the early 20th century would have thought a really good reserve beer in the early 19th century would have tasted like. So this is kind of their version of a recreation of what their grandfathers brewed. And I really like this style. Really, somebody declined the tasting because there was a Sticke Alt. That is a really weirdly specific reason to decline a tasting, but all right, good for them. He's gonna be angry and lonely forever. Yes, Sticke Alt, the anti-incel beer. Well done. But no, I like this. I mean, it kind of smells a little bit like barbecue sauce to me. It has that smoke, it has that sweetness, it has that richness. It's very, very well caramelized. Now, alt beer was traditionally from Dusseldorf, but now has kind of become one of the pan-German beers that is kind of brewed all over Germany just because ale yeast is so much nicer to brew with. it's a top fermented, warm ferment beer that is then moved into lagering to produce those fruity notes. You get a little bit of both. I like alt. I like this style. It's rich and it's a little smoky and it's a little molassesy. Yeah, it is fascinating. It's a style we basically don't have a lot of reference points for, because amber ales and brown ales now tend to be very heavily hopped, and they counterbalance this sweetness with a heavy bitterness. This doesn't. The only real beer style for me that compares to this is like an old ale, a British style old ale, a style that I don't think I've ever actually had in the store, and I've only tasted because I brewed one of the home brewing manuals, like textbook old ales, and I had to buy like 3 of those little cartons of blackstrap molasses as fermentables for my batch, and that's what gave it that rich, smoky, caramelized sweetness. And the brewery is weird, and I'm so glad they're weird. I'm glad they're so different. Like, we've done a Maibock and a Dead IPA style and a Sticke alt, a style that we'll never get tired of saying the name of. We haven't done, like, their New England IPA or their sour. We will do the sour in a second, but, like, they're doing nothing but weird stuff, and I love that. When I had them in the store before, like, we did have their Maibock back then. Nobody bought it. We did have their Rausch beer, their smoked beer, and it was kind of like a heavy porter, or heavy brown ale, or a light porter. It was deep and it was chocolate. And it was very heavily smoked, and it tasted like chocolate dipped bacon. It was wonderful. They had a Baltic porter which tasted like an imperial stout, but it was lagers. It was very fruity and very pretty. They do weird stuff. They always have. If you go to their website, like all of their beer styles on their website, like, I don't even think they have like a standard IPA. I think like their IPA Blanche is like their core IPA. It's all weird stuff. And I love them for it. I love how stupid all of these styles are. I love that those are, for Alberta, like their core expressions. It's wonderful.
Hold it up to the light.
Which one? This one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Glass. Where the best spot is, but it sure is pretty.
It is very
Yeah,
pretty.
that's not bad.
Right there?
Bring her back a bit. Bring it back a bit. A little more. Quite a bit more.
Anytime,
Here,
Aaron.
give her.
What giver? I'm holding it still. What giver?
Not you. Give her. Yeah. Now pour it on the ground.
No, I'm not pouring it on the ground. Mark's gonna have to mop that up.
Pour some in Mark's glass.
Mark the hand. New hand. Hand the third.
Says.
Well, it's labeled as a lager, but alt is usually an ale. Like, that's the whole point, is we used to make ales, now we make lagers. But if it's labeled as a lager, I mean, it says red lager. It shouldn't be a red lager. That's not what a Sticke alt's supposed to be. We do need the air colorimeter, but unfortunately, Mark just drank the last of the Sticke alt. So the fact we don't have that is all Mark's fault. I'm just going to put it on here.
You know what? And all these cups are broken. So, like, the store doesn't have consistent cups to throw against the wall here. I don't know.
No, we have vastly better glasses. I think that's wildly unfair, Aaron. We got rid of those shitty little glasses that didn't taste like anything when you tasted out of them.
Yeah.
We got actual better glasses. So
You do now.
yeah, you can see a giant row of them from where you're standing.
Where?
Oh, hanging
they're
up there.
wine glasses.
So is that.
This is a
Bloody
smaller,
Aaron
right?
Trozo, man.
It's a smaller.
Mm-hmm. Bloody Aaron Trozo, man.
Yeah, true. Wait for you.
We're all sick of Aaron. It's been a long 2 years. All right, let's talk about what we have coming up next week, which, with apologies to everyone, will involve Aaron Trozo.
I'm adding the 10 pounds filter right now.
Alright, so Aaron's gonna make me real fat. We're gonna go with that. So, this is blind enthusiasm. I know I always say, hey, this is a brewery I've had in my back pocket for a while, something I wanted to talk about for a while. This is a brewery I've been trying to get for about a year and a half, 2 years. These folks in Edmonton are arguably a bigger deal within Edmonton than Cabin or 88 or Annex or Establishment are in Calgary. I was actually just in Edmonton last weekend trying to find some Blind Enthusiasm. I didn't actually go to Blind Enthusiasm. But I tried to go everywhere else and just find some, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's on our list, but we don't have any. We'll have it on like Tuesday, Wednesday, and it'll be like that day before we sell out again. They make crazy good beer, and they just came down and delivered to us on Monday. We've had a little bit of stuff on the shelf, but we were always very quiet about it because we didn't want to push it too hard. We finally have enough we can talk about it and do a tasting about it. So we have their this is not the order I originally set them up in. We have their rice lager, their rice cutter. So this is a easy drinking rice lager, very bright, very clean, very well done, but also it's been dry hopped with lemon drop and Mandarina Bavaria, so it actually has some like pretty interesting dry hop notes. We have their extra special monk, which is basically an ESB, fermented with Trappist yeast. So you get that like nice big dry biscuity character, but also all the fun, spicy, unique notes from the Trappist yeast. And then we have their 2 Z beers. We have Hazy and Zesty Z, one of which is a German-style Hefeweizen, so it's snappy and clean and fresh with a little bit of a lemon influence. And then we just have Chinook, Citra, and Nelson Sauvin, as well as a little bit of Galaxy and Enigma, just balancing out the whole beer. It's just a giant hazy IPA. A brewery that really doesn't go with trends. They don't do trends. They just do their own thing, and I'm very excited to talk about Blind Enthusiasm. We sent out an email Monday afternoon asking for a guest. They haven't got back to us yet, but they're gonna get back to us, and they're gonna be here. So
I have faith.
I'm gonna put in a 85% confidence that we are gonna have a guest for this one, and I'm really excited for that.
Odds.
So it's time to tape an iPhone to a raccoon and do an Eric and Craig episode. I agree. We do need an Eric and Craig episode. Which, if nothing else, you folks are going to get at the tail end of August as I'm going out of town. So, if nothing else, you are getting an Eric and Craig episode at the end of August. So, we'll talk about that. The fact that neither you... We'll just have Sky, Eric, and Craig do it. It'll be fine. And also Mark will host.
Mark.
So, this is the Tangerine, which when I originally bought it, just said Tangerine. I wasn't sure if it's a Tangerine. Wheat a Tangerine. Sour a Tangerine IPA. It just said Tangerine. And I kind of don't like this. It kind of smells like sulfur, doesn't it? Kind of smells like rotten egg. No, there's definitely something there that I am not grooving on. Yeah, I'm not. And there's really something eggy about that, isn't there? Me. You don't get it? Try that of mine. Do you get that? Yeah.
It's way more out of your glass.
Okay.
Holy.
Can I try yours?
Yep.
Oh, that's way cleaner. It's still there, but it's way cleaner.
Interesting.
Yeah, mine is coming off very much like, not rotten egg, but like really big hard-boiled egg. Yeah, I'm glad Tyler did too, because, yeah, this is not what I expected. Okay, Craig's all tangerine. Good. I haven't tasted this yet, Eric. This is all nose. And it's just egg. So much egg.
So much.
Doesn't taste like egg at all. It tastes lovely, tangerine, mandarin, very fresh, very easy drinking. But nose is just eggs.
Wild.
For me, eggs and some
Smell it.
citrus.
I smell it.
I am, wow. I wanted to talk about this a bit. Now I don't.
Dang.
Yeah, no, that's not a great way to finish, but that's where we're finishing, apparently. For me, ranking, I'm going to take this out, because that can't be how they intended that to taste. I put the... Ooh. I'm actually going to put the Maibock first. I really liked that. It was very fresh, very clean, very spicy. I'm going to put the Sticke alt second, because I thought that was an interesting style that we don't get to taste very often. Put the White IPA third. No slight on it, but just... I don't know, I like the German styles in these Quebecois brewers more. And the sour we're just going to leave out of the conversation, because it doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, the taste, the egg is not in the taste, it's all in the nose, but it kind of ruins the beer for me. Which is unfortunate. Alright, well, I know it's a bit early, but I think we'll call it there, because I was going to do a whole talk on this tangerine sour, but it just tastes like eggs. And I really can't do much with that without being, unfortunately, like, mean to the brewery, because that's just... That can't be what they intended, and I don't want to talk about it when it's clearly not what the brewery was going for. So, we will see you all next week for Blind Enthusiasm. I will be here, Aaron will be here, Sky will be here, and it will be a great time. I'll see you all then. Have a wonderful rest of your week. See you in 7 days. Good night.